All right, you sick fucks. Welcome back to the deep dive.
Yeah.
So today, we're going to get our hands dirty with a dude who's practically a meme at this point, Gandhi.
Ugh,
Yeah. Yeah, we all know the whole loincloths, peaceful protest, the saintly bullshit.
saintly.
But let's cut the crap. This deep dive is for those of you who want the real story, warts and all. We're going beyond the bullshit and getting into the nitty-gritty of who this guy really was.
You're absolutely right. Gandhi's life is way more complicated and, frankly, way more interesting than that simple image that's usually shoved in our faces. I mean, he was born in India, trained as a lawyer in London, spent some pretty important years in South Africa.
Oh, yeah.
And then, of course, led India's independence movement. But to really get this, to really understand all that, we got to start at the beginning.
Okay, so let's unpack this. Most people don't realize Gandhi was married at 13.
13.
13. To put that into perspective, the dude was barely old enough to jerk off properly, and he's already got a wife. And get this in his autobiography, he doesn't exactly shy away from describing his, shall we say, enthusiasm for his young bride.
Kasturbai.
Kasturbai. Not exactly the image of a celibate saint, is it?
Well, it's true. It does speak to the complexity of the man. I mean, we can't really view Gandhi through a modern lens, can we? I mean, arranged marriages were totally normal in his culture. And his youthful desires, while a bit jarring to us now, were probably pretty typical for the time.
I guess.
But you got to admit, it does add a certain something to the narrative.
Yeah, it does. And speaking of layers, there's also the fact that Gandhi and Kasturbai lost their first child while they were still teenagers themselves.
Oh, God.
Talk about a fucked up introduction to adulthood.
Absolutely. It's a tragedy that's often overlooked, but it undoubtedly shaped him. Imagine the emotional weight of all those experiences. A forced marriage, the intensity of those physical desires, and then the devastating loss of a child, all before most of us have even finished puberty.
It makes you wonder how this seemingly ordinary, horny teenager transformed into the Mahatma, this global symbol of peace and resistance. Was there a specific event, a turning point that sparked this radical shift?
There was. It happened on a train in South Africa. Gandhi was a young lawyer at the time, and he was thrown off a train for refusing to move from a first-class compartment despite having a valid ticket.
Seriously.
The reason? He was Indian, and in the eyes of the South African government at the time, that meant he was a second-class citizen.
So a racist incident on a train sparked the whole fight for justice thing. Ironic, considering he was supporting the British in the Boer War just a few years earlier. Talk about mixed messages. What the hell was that about?
Well, Gandhi's early activism is fascinating because it shows a man grappling with some very complex realities. At that point, his focus was mainly on securing rights for Indians living in South Africa. He believed in the British Empire.
Really?
Yeah, he hoped that by showing loyalty, by supporting their cause, that Indians would be treated as equals. He even organized an Indian ambulance corps during the war.
So the Brits just fucked him over.
Yeah, essentially. After the war, discrimination against Indians continued. This betrayal by the empire was a real turning point for Gandhi. He realized that appealing to their sense of fairness was pointless. They didn't see Indians as equals no matter how much they contributed.
Okay, so that's when he went full-blown rebel, ditched the whole be nice to the Brits strategy, and got down to business.
Not quite. This is where Gandhi's philosophy of satyagraha starts to take shape. It's often translated as truth force, and it's really the foundation of his nonviolent resistance. He recognized that the British Empire relied on the cooperation of the colonized people to function. So he theorized that by withdrawing that cooperation, by engaging in mass civil disobedience, they could bring the whole system to a standstill.
Okay, so satyagraha, nonviolent resistance.
Yeah.
How the hell did that work in practice?
Mhm.
And was he really against violence in all L cases? Because let's be honest, the dude wasn't a saint.
This is where we get into the nuances of ahimsa, the principle of nonviolence that formed the core of Gandhi's beliefs. Ahimsa is more than just pacifism. It's a commitment to causing no harm in thought, word, or deed to any living being. But, and this is crucial, Gandhi wasn't against violence in all circumstances.
Hold up, so the pacifist poster boy wasn't actually a complete pacifist. What the fuck?
Gandhi believed there were situations where violence might be the lesser evil. In Hind Swaraj, he writes, "I do believe that where there is only a choice between cowardice and violence, I would advise violence." For him, ahimsa was about choosing the path of least harm, not necessarily avoiding all conflict.
So he wasn't afraid to throw down if he had to. But he obviously preferred the whole nonviolent approach. Was that a strategic choice, or did he genuinely believe in its power?
Gandhi believed in the transformative power of nonviolence. He saw it as a way to not only achieve political goals, but also to awaken the moral conscience of the oppressor. He believed that by refusing to meet violence with violence, by maintaining a steadfast commitment to truth and justice, they could expose the inherent immorality of the British Empire and ultimately win over public opinion.
Fine, that makes sense. But how did he apply this truth force shit in the real world? Give us some examples of how this satyagraha thing actually worked.
One of the most powerful examples is the Salt Satyagraha of 1930. The British had imposed a salt tax on Indians, forcing them to buy expensive British salt instead of producing their own jile. Gandhi saw this as a symbol of British oppression and decided to challenge it directly.
So he led a march to the sea to make some salt. That doesn't sound particularly revolutionary.
It wasn't the act of making salt that was revolutionary, it was the symbolism and the mass mobilization that inspired Gandhi, along with thousands of followers, embarked on a 240-mile march to the Arabian Sea, where they defied the British law by simply collecting salt from the seawater.
Okay, that's pretty badass.
Yeah.
But did it actually work? Did the Brits just roll over and say, all right, fine, have your damn salt?
Not exactly. The Salt Satyagraha led to widespread arrests and brutal crackdowns by the British authorities, but it also captured global attention, exposing the brutality of the British Raj and generating sympathy for the Indian independence movement. It was a pivotal moment in the struggle for freedom, demonstrating the power of nonviolent resistance to challenge even the mightiest empire.
So this horny teenager who lost his first kid somehow becomes this badass revolutionary, taking on the British Empire with nothing but salt and some seriously stubborn principles. It's a hell of a story, but we're just getting started.
Indeed. We've only scratched the surface of Gandhi's complex and fascinating life. We still need to delve into his role in India's independence movement, the tumultuous events of partition, and the tragic irony of his assassination.
Welcome back. Now, where were we? Ah, yes, Gandhi, the salt-wielding revolutionary. But it doesn't end there. In fact, things get a whole lot messier as we move into the later years of his life. Right, because India finally kicked the Brits to the curb in 1947. But it wasn't exactly a clean break, was it?
Yeah.
The whole partition thing, India and Pakistan splitting up, turned into a bloodbath. Millions displaced Hindus and Muslims slaughtering each other.
Did Gandhi fuck up somehow?
Well, hindsight's always 20/20, isn't it?
True.
Gandhi was devastated by the violence that erupted during partition. He'd always envisioned a unified India, a place where Hindus and Muslims could coexist peacefully. He desperately tried to quell the unrest, even going on hunger strikes to stop the bloodshed.
So the stubborn old bastard starved himself to try and shame people into being decent human beings.
Ballsy move. Did it work? It certainly put pressure on political leaders and drew attention to the horrors of the violence, but ultimately it wasn't enough to prevent the tragedy that unfolded. Some argue that Gandhi's unwavering idealism, his insistence on unity in the face of such deep-seated religious tensions, may have actually blinded him to the realities on the ground. So he was too busy chasing his utopian dream to see the shitstorm brewing right in front of him. That's kind of tragic. And then to top it all off, the peace-loving Mahatma gets assassinated by a Hindu nationalist. What a fucked up ending.
It is a tragic irony, isn't it? Gandhi, the man who dedicated his life to nonviolence and unity, is killed by one of his own people. Someone who saw him as too accommodating to Muslims, a traitor to the Hindu cause.
So was it all for nothing then? Did Gandhi achieve anything lasting, or was he just a naive idealist who got played by everyone and ended up dead for his troubles?
Hold on, let's not dismiss his legacy so quickly. It's true, Gandhi was a complex figure full of contradictions, but to say he achieved nothing would be a gross oversimplification. He mobilized millions of Indians, awakened their desire for self-rule, and challenged the very foundations of the British Empire. You can't just erase that.
You're right. The dude was a master manipulator.
Yeah.
He knew how to use the media, how to rally people to his cause, how to turn public opinion against the Brits. And those hunger strikes, let's be honest, that was some next-level psychological warfare. Starve yourself to get your way brilliant.
It was a tactic, certainly, but it was also a testament to his unwavering commitment to his principles. He was willing to suffer to put his own life on the line for what he believed in, and it worked. The British couldn't ignore him. They couldn't afford the bad press of letting this frail old man die on their watch.
Okay, so he was a savvy political operator, but what about the whole nonviolence thing? Was that just a clever tactic to make the Brits look bad, or did he actually believe that bullshit?
Gandhi's commitment to ahimsa was genuine. It was a core principle of his philosophy, a way of life. He believed that violence, even in self-defense, ultimately perpetuates the cycle of hatred and suffering. He argued that true strength lies in resisting injustice without resorting to brutality.
Yeah, but does that shit actually work in the real world? I mean, look what happened during partition. Violence wins, doesn't it?
Gandhi would argue that the violence of partition wasn't a failure of ahimsa, but a failure to fully embrace it. He believed that if both Hindus and Muslims had genuinely committed to nonviolence, if they had truly understood and internalized its principles, the bloodshed could have been avoided.
That's a tough sell, man. People are tribal. They're going to fight for their side, their religion, their whatever. You can't just wish violence away.
Gandhi wasn't naive. He understood human nature, but he also believed in the transformative power of love, forgiveness, and understanding. He argued that true change comes from changing hearts and minds, not through force or coercion.
Okay, let's get real for a second. If Gandhi were alive today, what the fuck would he be fighting for? Would he still be this non-violent guru, or would he have to adapt to a world where everyone's got a drone and nuke up their ass?
It's a fascinating question, isn't it? Would Gandhi's methods still be relevant in the 21st century in a world of terrorism, climate change, and global inequality? It's hard to say for certain, but one thing's for sure, he wouldn't shy away from the biggest challenges facing humanity.
Would he be on Twitter calling out world leaders for being asshats? Would he be leading marches against climate change, or would he be too busy meditating in some ashram, ignoring the dumpster fire that is modern society?
Gandhi was a master of adapting his tactics to the circumstances. He wasn't afraid to evolve his thinking. He was initially skeptical of technology, for example, but later embraced the use of radio and newspapers to spread his message. So who knows? Maybe he would have become a social media influencer, dropping truth bombs on Instagram, mobilizing millions with a tap on his smartphone.
Gandhi, with millions of followers, hashtags for Satyagraha trending worldwide. It's not that far-fetched, is it? But wouldn't all the online hate and negativity get to him? Could the Mahatma survive the cesspool of the internet?
That's a good question. Gandhi was deeply spiritual, a man of immense inner strength and discipline. But he was also human. He experienced doubt, anger, frustration, just like the rest of us. Whether he could maintain his composure in the face of the relentless negativity and vitriol that permeates the online world is a matter of speculation.
Maybe he would have found a way to transcend the toxicity, to use his platform to promote dialogue, understanding, and compassion. Or maybe he would have just thrown his phone in the ocean and gone back to spinning his own damn cloth. Either way, it's fun to imagine.
It is. But regardless of how he might navigate the modern world, one thing remains certain. Gandhi's life and legacy continue to challenge us, to make us question our own values and beliefs.
All right, folks, we're going to move right along to exploring the more controversial aspects of Gandhi's life, the stuff they don't teach you in school. Get ready to have your perceptions challenged, because we're about to get into the nitty-gritty of sex race and all the messy bits they left out of the history books. All right, you magnificent bastards, we're back and ready to wrap up this deep dive into the wild world of Mahatma Gandhi. And you know, we saved the juiciest bits for last. Shit they don't put on those motivational posters. The sex, the race, the whole messy underbelly of the saintly image.
Now, let's not get carried away with all the sensationalism.
Yeah.
But yes, there are aspects of Gandhi's life that we tend to kind of tiptoe around, especially when it comes to, his views on sexuality and race. And to be honest, some of it is pretty damn hard to swallow considering the image we have of him today.
Okay, so let's just get straight to the good stuff, the sex.
Yeah.
The man preached celibacy, right? But there was some seriously weird shit going on behind the scenes.
Gandhi's views on sexuality were complex, to say the least. He took a vow of celibacy at the age of 37.
Okay.
But he continued to share a bed with young women, including his grandniece,
Cool.
as a way to, in his words, test his willpower.
Hold the fucking phone. He was sleeping with his grandniece.
Oh, yes.
To test his willpower. What in the actual fuck was this guy thinking?
Gandhi believed that true spiritual power came from conquering sexual desire. He saw these experiments as a way to purify himself and achieve a higher level of consciousness, of course from a modern perspective.
Yeah.
It's deeply problematic, to say the least. It smacks of exploitation and a really disturbing power dynamic.
No kidding.
Yeah.
It's hard to square that with the image of the peaceful, loving Mahatma. Makes you wonder what other skeletons are hiding in that closet.
Oh.
But it wasn't just the sex stuff, right? His views on race were pretty messed up too, weren't they?
Gandhi's relationship with race is, like many other aspects of his life, complicated and full of contradictions. I mean, he experienced racism firsthand during his time in South Africa.
Right.
He faced discrimination and humiliation. But while he fought tirelessly for Indian rights, his early activism really focused solely on Indians. And some of his statements about Africans were, well, let's just say they don't exactly age well.
So he was all about equality as long as it was for his own people. Sounds a bit hypocritical, doesn't it?
It's important to remember the context Gandhi was operating within, a system of deep-seated white supremacy, where racial hierarchies were just accepted as the norm.
I guess.
His initial focus was on securing rights for Indians within that existing framework. He saw Indians as superior to Africans, arguing they were closer to Europeans in terms of civilization and culture. It's a perspective that's really difficult to accept today.
Yeah, for sure. Can't just ignore that shit. But did his views ever change? Did he ever come around to seeing all races as equal?
There is evidence that his thinking did evolve later in his life. He spoke out against racism in broader terms, emphasizing the shared humanity of all people. But unfortunately, those early views still cast a shadow over his legacy.
So after all this, actually this deep dive into the man, the myth, the legend, what's the final verdict? Is Gandhi a hero, a villain, or just a flawed human being trying to figure things out in a fucked up world?
I think it's a mistake to try and categorize him so neatly.
Yeah.
He was a product of his time, both enlightened and limited by, the social and cultural norms of the era. He accomplished incredible things, inspired millions, and left a mark on history that you just can't deny. But he also had beliefs and did things that are deeply troubling, even reprehensible from where we stand today.
So what can we take away from this guy, from this complicated, contradictory figure?
I think Gandhi's life forces us to engage with history in all its messy glory, to avoid those simple stories and easy answers. He's a reminder that even the most revered figures are just human, capable of both great things and huge fuck-ups. It's up to us to wrestle with those contradictions, to learn from the good and the bad of the past, and to keep striving for a more just and equitable world, even if it means questioning the legacies of those we hold dear.
Well said.
Yeah.
And on that note, we're wrapping up this deep dive into the mind-blowing, frustrating, and ultimately fascinating world of Mahatma Gandhi. We hope this has left you with more questions than answers, because that's what the deep dive is all about.
Yeah.
Provoking thought, challenging assumptions, and encouraging you, our awesome listeners, to keep digging for the truth wherever the hell it may lead.
Exactly. Don't settle for the easy stories, the sanitized versions of history. Keep asking those tough questions, keep pushing back against the status quo, and keep trying to understand just how complex this world really is.
And most importantly, keep it real. Keep it raw and keep it fucking interesting. Until next time, peace out, you magnificent bastards.